The military dog had failed every test. He growled at handlers, resisted commands, and was labeled too dangerous to continue. Everyone agreed he was broken. Then, from the back row, a homeless man stood up. No uniform, no badge, no authority. Just tired eyes and a voice shaped by war. While others saw aggression, he saw something else. Not defiance, not madness, duty. When he spoke to the dog in a language no manual had written down, the animal froze. And in that moment, everyone realized this was not about training a dog. It was about finishing a mission that never truly ended. The wind off the Strait of Juan de Fuca cut through Port Townsend like a blade sharpened by salt and time. Late autumn had settled over the coastal city, bringing low gray clouds, a persistent mist, and the kind of cold that crept through layers of clothing rather than announcing itself outright. Fishing boats rocked gently in the harbor below the bluffs, their masts clinking softly, while gulls circled overhead, crying into the damp air as if complaining about a world that refused to warm up. Just inland from the docks, separated from the water by a stretch of gravel road and chain-link fencing, sat the Port Townsend K-9 training facility. Functional, weather-worn, and built more for purpose than comfort. The main evaluation field was a rectangle of packed dirt, bordered by faded white markers. Years of drills had hardened the ground, leaving it scarred with paw prints and boot impressions layered one over another, like sediment. A small group of observers stood behind a secondary barrier. Trainers, administrators, and 2 civilian consultants brought in to review the case. No families, no press. This was not a demonstration meant to inspire confidence. It was a reckoning. At the center of the field stood Rex. Rex was a 5-year-old German shepherd, large even by breed standards, with a dense coat of sable black and deep brown that darkened along his spine like a shadow that refused to lift. His ears were upright and alert, not twitching nervously, but locked forward with disciplined focus. A thin scar ran along the edge of his left muzzle, half hidden beneath coarse fur, and another faint line crossed his right shoulder, visible only when the light hit it just right. His eyes were a striking amber, not wild, not frantic, but sharp and watchful, tracking everything within the field of view as if mapping threat vectors rather than surroundings. A heavy-duty harness was secured around his chest, reinforced stitching clearly visible, the kind used for dogs that could not be trusted with standard gear. A short leash connected him to the handler standing several feet away, a precaution more than a tool. Rex's posture was rigid, weight balanced forward on his front legs, muscles coiled tight beneath his coat. He was not lunging, he was waiting. Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the marked circle, clipboard held tight against her chest. She was 36, tall and lean with a runner's build, her brown hair pulled into a practical low ponytail beneath a navy blue cap marked with the facility's insignia. Her face was calm in the way people learned to be calm when panic no longer served them. Years earlier, during her first assignment as a K-9 handler, a dog had broken free during a training mishap, resulting in a fractured wrist and 6 months of recovery. Since then, Sarah had cultivated control in every aspect of her work, measured movements, steady voice, no wasted gestures. Around people, she was professional and reserved. Around dogs, she was patient to the point of stubbornness. She watched Rex now with a mixture of respect and resignation. "This is Evaluation 7, she said evenly, her voice carrying across the field. "Approach simulation, non-threatening posture." The decoy, a younger trainer named Mark Evans, mid-20s, athletic but visibly tense, stepped forward. Mark had short blonde hair cropped too neatly to be practical and the restless energy of someone eager to prove himself. He had volunteered for this role, despite knowing Rex's record, insisting that proper technique would make the difference. He raised his hand slightly, palms visible, body angled to appear non-confrontational as he closed the distance. Rex reacted instantly, not with a bark, not with a charge, His head snapped toward Mark, ears rotating to triangulate position, nostrils flaring as he drew in scent and movement together. His weight shifted lower, spine aligning, tail rigid rather than raised. This was not aggression. This was readiness. "Hold," Sarah said, sharper now. Mark stopped. Rex did not advance, but his muscles tightened further, a low vibration traveling through his frame. When Mark took a cautious half-step forward, barely more than a test, Rex surged against the harness with explosive force, stopping just short of the leash's limit. The metal clasp snapped taut with a sharp crack that echoed across the field. Dust rose around Rex's paws as he dug in, eyes locked on Mark's chest, not his face. "Back!" Sarah ordered. Mark retreated immediately. Rex did not pursue. He reset, returning to the exact stance he'd held before, breath steady but fast, as if nothing had happened. Silence settled over the field. Dr. Alan Pierce, the facility's consulting veterinarian, adjusted his glasses and made a note on his tablet. He was in his late 50s, balding, with a soft-spoken manner that contrasted with the authority of his role. Years working with military and law enforcement dogs had taught him that behavior was rarely as simple as aggression or compliance. Still, he had exhausted every explanation he knew for Rex. "That's consistent," he murmured. "Same response window, same trigger." Sarah nodded once, jaw tight. They tried again, a different angle, a slower approach. A voice command paired with hand signals Rex had responded to flawlessly during his first 2 years of service. Each time, the result was the same. Rex did not lash out indiscriminately. He did not snarl or snap at shadows. He responded only to direct approach with precision and force, as if intercepting an invisible threat before it crossed an imaginary line. After the third attempt, Sarah raised her hand. "That's enough." The word carried weight. Everyone knew what it meant. The evaluation board gathered near the sideline. Sarah, Dr. Pierce, the facility director, and 2 senior trainers flown in from a regional command. Papers were exchanged, notes compared. No one raised their voice. There was no argument. The conclusion had been forming for months. The director, a broad-shouldered man in his early 50s, named Thomas Reed, cleared his throat. Reed had the look of someone who had once been formidable and now relied more on experience than presence. His hair was gray at the temples, his posture stiff from old injuries. He had overseen dozens of K-9 careers, from promising beginnings to quiet retirements. "We've tried every protocol available to us," Reed said. "Modified conditioning, environmental resets, handler rotation, controlled exposure. There's no pattern of improvement." Sarah looked out at Rex again. The dog stood exactly where he had been left, head high, scanning the field beyond the people, beyond the fence, toward something only he could see. "He's not unpredictable," she said quietly. "That's the problem. He's consistent. He just isn't here." Dr. Pierce exhaled slowly. "Which makes him a liability." No one contradicted him. Reed nodded once, the decision settling heavily on his shoulders. "Then this stands as the final evaluation. Effective immediately, Rex is removed from active training status pending formal review." Sarah closed her clipboard. The sound was soft but final. Across the field, Rex remained alert, unmoving, waiting for a command that never came. Lucas Hale sat on the last aluminum bench, far enough back that no one felt obliged to acknowledge him, close enough that he could see the fine details others missed. The cold seeped through the denim of his worn jeans and into his knees, but he did not shift. He had learned long ago that discomfort was information, not an emergency. At 41, Lucas carried himself with the quiet economy of someone who had once lived by strict rules and now lived by none. His hair was dark brown, threaded with premature gray, cut unevenly as if done with clippers borrowed and returned too late. His beard was short but unkempt, framing a face weathered by sun, wind, and years of poor sleep. Beneath a faded olive jacket that had once been part of a uniform, his frame was lean and compact, strength preserved not by gyms, but by habit. The evaluation field lay open before him, and at its center stood Rex. Lucas had not reacted when the name was spoken earlier. Names changed. Dogs were reassigned, renamed, reclassified. What held his attention now was posture. Rex's weight distribution was wrong for a standard training stance. Too forward, too deliberate. The dog was not bracing against fear. He was preparing to intercept. Each time someone approached him head-on, Rex adjusted his angle by degrees, so subtle most people would call it coincidence. Lucas knew better. He had seen that posture in narrow alleys overseas, in half-collapsed doorways and tunnel mouths where hesitation meant death. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his thighs, eyes narrowed against the fine mist drifting in from the harbor. The air smelled of salt, diesel, and wet gravel. The gulls had quieted, as if sensing tension that had nothing to do with weather. Lucas did not come to the facility by accident. He had followed the sound of activity from the docks earlier that morning, drawn by the sight of transport vehicles and the word evaluation printed on a temporary sign zip-tied to the fence. Free coffee had been offered near the entrance, and he had taken it without comment, hands wrapped around the paper cup, as if warmth might soak into his bones. He had planned to leave after that. He always planned to leave. Then Rex moved. A handler crossed the field, cautious, rehearsed. Rex's head turned, not tracking the man, but scanning the space beyond him. Lucas felt something tighten behind his ribs. That was not a dog focused on the present. That was a dog watching an approach vector that no longer existed. Sarah Mitchell stood near the boundary line, posture straight, shoulders squared. Lucas studied her the way he studied Rex. Sarah was tall and spare, her movements controlled to the point of severity. Her eyes missed little, but they did not linger on any one thing for long. The kind of woman who learned early that if you watched too closely, people assumed you were afraid. Lucas recognized that discipline. He had worn it himself once. Later, he would learn that a training accident early in her career had shaped that restraint, teaching her that chaos arrived fastest when you underestimated it. The evaluation ended the way Lucas knew it would. No shouting, no dramatic failure. Just a series of controlled attempts, followed by the quiet acceptance of a conclusion no one wanted. When the facility director closed his folder, Lucas felt the finality of it like a door sealing shut. Final evaluation. The words echoed in his head, carrying weight beyond their meaning. Around him, the small crowd shifted. A few trainers spoke in low voices, already dissecting technique and protocol, trying to turn outcome into lesson. Lucas stayed seated. He watched Rex remain in place, eyes alert, waiting for instruction that never came. That waiting was the worst part. Lucas had waited like that himself once, long after orders stopped coming. He became aware of someone sitting a few benches down. A woman in her early 30s, bundled in a dark wool coat, notebook balanced on her knee. Emily Carter had been taking notes throughout the evaluation, her pen moving steadily, pausing only when Rex surged against the harness. She was not a trainer. Her shoes were practical but unsuited for the field, her hands ink-stained rather than calloused. Emily worked with the County Veteran Outreach Office, though few here paid attention to that distinction. She believed in systems because she had to. Belief kept the lights on. Emily glanced toward Lucas, curiosity flickering across her face. He looked out of place, and she had learned to notice people who did not fit where they were expected. For a moment, she considered saying something, then thought better of it. Silence, she knew, was sometimes the last thing people owned. Lucas stood as the group began to disperse. His joints protested briefly, then settled. He moved toward the fence, hands sliding into the pockets of his jacket. Up close, the chain-link barrier was cold and damp beneath his fingers. He stopped a few feet back, respecting the boundary without consciously deciding to. Rex shifted again, subtle this time. His head turned, ears angling toward Lucas, though the man made no sound. The connection was not mystical. It was recognition, the way veterans recognized one another across crowded rooms without exchanging a word. Lucas's breath caught. He told himself it was nothing. Pattern recognition was a dangerous thing when memory filled in gaps with what you wanted to see. Sarah noticed the shift in Rex's attention and followed it to the fence. Her gaze landed on Lucas, and she frowned slightly. Not suspicion. Assessment. She took a step closer, her boots crunching on gravel. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice even. Lucas shook his head once. "Just watching." "Facilities closed for the day," Sarah said. "Not unkindly. Procedural." "I know." She hesitated, studying him. There was something about the way he stood, relaxed but ready, that unsettled her. Most spectators leaned forward when dogs lunged. Lucas had leaned back, eyes narrowing, as if cataloging data. "You're not here for the coffee," she said. "No?" Rex's gaze flicked between them, body still, tension unresolved. Sarah felt a prickle of unease she could not place. "You work with dogs?" she asked. "Used to." "How long ago?" "Long enough." It was not an answer, but it was an honest one. Sarah nodded slowly, letting the exchange end where it was. She turned back toward the field as staff began securing equipment. Lucas stayed a moment longer, eyes on Rex. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words sat heavy in his chest. Memory was a treacherous guide. He had trusted it once and paid dearly. As he turned away, Rex let out a low sound, barely audible, not a growl, but a breath pushed through clenched jaws. Lucas froze, then continued walking, heart hammering against his ribs. Outside the fence, the harbor spread out beneath a sky threatening rain. Lucas pulled his jacket tighter and headed back toward the docks, every step measured, every thought restrained. He told himself he was wrong. He told himself this was just another ghost. Behind him, Rex remained standing, eyes fixed on the place where the man had been, waiting for a command that had not yet been given. Emily Carter's office sat above a bait shop 2 blocks from the harbor, a narrow space that smelled faintly of old paper, burnt coffee, and the sea. The windows rattled whenever a truck passed, and on wet mornings like this one, condensation crept down the glass in slow, uneven lines. Emily liked the office anyway. It was cheap, overlooked, and close enough to the docks that the men and women she worked with did not feel like they were being pulled too far from the lives they understood. At 32, Emily was slight in build, her shoulders narrow beneath a charcoal sweater that had been mended more than once. Her auburn hair fell to her shoulders in loose waves she never bothered to tame, and her pale blue eyes carried a quiet intensity that people often mistook for softness. It was not softness, it was persistence. She sat at her desk now, reviewing attendance sheets for the Port Townsend Veteran Transition Program. The pages told a story she already knew by heart. Names crossed out, dates circled, notes in the margins written in her careful hand. Did not return. Declined follow-up. Left town. One by one, the people she had worked to enroll drifted away, not in anger, but in something far worse. Disengagement. Emily had grown up in a military family. Her father had served 20 years in the Army, her childhood shaped by base housing and moving vans. When he retired, he had struggled, though he hid it well, retreating into long walks and quiet evenings, rather than admitting he no longer knew who he was without rank or routine. Emily remembered that silence. It was what had pushed her into this work, into believing that transition was not about teaching veterans how to live again, but about giving them permission to stop surviving. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it, eyes lingering on a familiar name. Michael Lawson, 48, former Marine Infantry. He had lasted 3 weeks in the program before disappearing. The last time Emily had seen him, he had smiled politely and told her he appreciated what she was trying to do. but that it felt like learning a new language with no one to practice with. The door opened quietly. Daniel Brooks stepped inside, closing it behind him with deliberate care. Daniel was 55, tall and broad-shouldered, his posture still rigid despite the civilian clothes he wore. His hair was cropped short and white at the temples, his face deeply lined, as if carved by years of sun and strain. He moved slowly, not from weakness, but from caution, every action measured. Daniel had served as a logistics officer, a man accustomed to order and planning. When those structures vanished, he had unraveled quietly, painfully. "You got a minute?" he asked. Emily gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Always." Daniel sat, hands folded in his lap. His knuckles were thick, scarred, his wedding ring loose on his finger. He had lost weight since joining the program, not from lack of food, but from a constant low-grade tension that refused to ease. "I'm thinking about stepping back," he said. Emily nodded, inviting him to continue. "It's not you," Daniel added quickly, "or the program. I wake up every morning and I'm still there. Doesn't matter that I'm not. My body doesn't know that." Emily leaned back slightly, listening. She had learned that filling silence too quickly robbed people of the chance to say what mattered. "I miss being useful," Daniel said finally. "Not busy, useful." That word landed with familiar weight. After he left, promising to think it over, Emily stared at the harbor through her window. Fishing boats moved in slow arcs, crews working with practiced efficiency. Purpose was visible there, tangible. She wondered when she had started expecting the people she served to find that same clarity without guidance. Later that afternoon, Emily walked toward the K-9 training facility. She had an appointment with the director to discuss potential collaboration, though she had little hope. The program barely tolerated her presence. Dogs were easier, she suspected, because their missions were defined. The facility grounds were quiet now, the evaluation field empty, except for a lone figure near the kennels. Sarah Mitchell stood with her arms crossed, watching as Rex was guided back into his enclosure. Without the harness, the dog looked less imposing, his movements controlled, almost restrained. Emily paused, observing from a distance. Rex's kennel was reinforced steel, clean but stark. He entered without resistance, turning once to scan the area before sitting, posture still alert. Emily felt a tightening in her chest. She had seen that look in people, waiting without knowing for what. Sarah noticed her and approached, boots crunching on gravel. Up close, Emily could see the strain beneath Sarah's composure. The tall trainer's eyes were sharp, but tired, the corners etched with lines that spoke of responsibility carried too long without relief. "I didn't expect to see you today," Sarah said. "I wanted to follow up," Emily replied. "About the dogs that don't make it through." Sarah's jaw tightened. "They don't fail. The system does." Emily smiled faintly. "That's what I keep saying about the veterans." Sarah studied her for a moment. "You really believe that?" "I do." They stood in silence, the sound of distant waves filling the space between them. Emily glanced back toward Rex. "He looks like he's still working," she said softly. Sarah followed her gaze. "That's the problem." Emily hesitated, then spoke. "I see the same thing in the people I work with. They're not resisting help. They're still on duty." Sarah exhaled slowly. "You're saying we're asking them to shut down without telling them the mission's over?" "Yes?" Sarah rubbed a hand over her face. "We don't have a protocol for that." Emily nodded. "Neither do I. That's why my program keeps losing people." As Emily turned to leave, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen. An unknown number. She answered. "Emily Carter," she said. "This is Thomas Reed," the voice on the other end said. "Facility Director." Emily straightened. "Yes, sir." "We had an observer at today's evaluation," Reed continued, "a man sitting near the back. "Do you know him?" Emily thought of the quiet figure on the bench, the way Rex had reacted. "I saw him," she said. "I don't know him." Reed paused. "If he reaches out to your office, I want to know." After the call ended, Emily stood still, the pieces shifting in her mind. The veterans who drifted away. The dog who would not stand down. The man beyond the fence who watched like someone reading a language he had once spoken fluently. That evening, Emily returned to her office and added a new note to her board, written in blue marker. Not broken, still on mission. She did not know yet how those words would matter, only that they felt true. The second incident happened 3 days later, under a sky the color of dull steel. Rain hung in the air without fully falling, leaving the ground slick and the world muted, as if sound itself had learned to tread carefully. The Port Townsend K-9 training facility had reopened the evaluation field for what was officially termed a reassessment, though everyone involved understood it was procedural more than hopeful. Rex was no longer being tested for progress. He was being documented for removal. Lucas Hale had not planned to return. He told himself that as he stood across the gravel road from the facility, hands buried deep in the pockets of his olive jacket. He had slept beneath the pier the night before, wrapped in a donated blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and cigarettes. His body ached in familiar places. His shoulder throbbed where an old injury never quite healed. Still, something had pulled him back, a quiet insistence that refused to loosen its grip. From beyond the fence he could see Rex again. The dog was restrained, not by panic, but by design. 2 handlers stood at angles meant to box him in, their movements careful, rehearsed. Rex's ears rotated independently, tracking both men, his head dipping slightly as if measuring distance and timing. The posture was wrong for a dog meant to relearn civilian obedience. It was right for a dog anticipating contact in a hostile corridor. Lucas stepped closer to the fence without realizing it. On the field, Sarah Mitchell watched the setup with tight focus. She looked more tired than she had 3 days earlier, the controlled calm of her movements strained by sleepless nights and the weight of a decision she did not agree with but was obligated to enforce. Her tall frame was rigid, shoulders squared, but there was a subtle stiffness in her stance that spoke of stress held too long. She gave the signal. The approach began. One handler moved forward, slow and deliberate. Rex's reaction was immediate and precise. He surged, muscles snapping into motion, the leash going taut as he redirected his body toward the advancing figure. There was no warning bark, no bluff, just intent. "Hold him," Sarah called out. The handlers tightened their grip. Rex fought not to escape, but to advance, claws scraping against the packed dirt as he tried to close a distance that existed only in his mind. A low sound vibrated in his chest, not a growl, but something deeper, like breath forced through memory. Lucas felt it in his gut. "That's not loss of control," he muttered, too quietly for anyone to hear. A security officer stationed near the perimeter noticed Lucas then and stepped into his path. The officer was young, broad-shouldered, with the rigid posture of someone new to authority. His hand hovered near his radio. "You can't be here," the officer said. Firm, rehearsed. Lucas stopped. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply kept his eyes on Rex. "I'm not crossing," he said. "Just watching." The officer hesitated, glancing toward the field. Rex lunged again, harder this time, forcing the handlers to brace. The sound of metal hardware straining cut through the air. Lucas took an involuntary step forward. "Sir," the officer warned. Before the situation could escalate, another voice cut in. Calm, weathered, carrying authority that did not need volume. "That's enough." Captain Robert Ellis stepped out from the edge of the training area. Ellis was in his early 60s, tall but stooped slightly at the shoulders as if years of responsibility had pressed him downward inch by inch. His hair was iron gray, trimmed short, his face deeply lined, eyes sharp beneath heavy brows. He wore his uniform with a familiarity that bordered on indifference, as though rank were something he had grown into rather than earned. He had spent most of his career in training and oversight, the kind of officer who remembered names long after others forgot them. His gaze was fixed not on Rex, but on Lucas. The recognition did not come all at once. It never did. First, it was posture, the way Lucas stood without shifting his weight. Then, it was the stillness, the habit of watching everything without appearing to watch anything at all. Finally, it was the eyes. Older now, harder, but unmistakable. Ellis felt a quiet jolt of disbelief. "Hale," he said. The name landed like a dropped tool. Lucas turned his head slowly, eyes meeting Ellis's. For a moment, neither spoke. Rain finally began to fall, light but steady, dotting the dust and darkening the ground. "Captain," Lucas said. The security officer looked between them, confused. Sarah noticed the exchange and felt a flicker of surprise. She had never seen Captain Ellis hesitate like that. "You shouldn't be here," Ellis said, though there was no reprimand in his tone. Only fact. "Didn't plan to be," Lucas replied. Ellis took a step closer, studying him openly now. The worn jacket, the hollowed cheeks, the familiar stance unchanged beneath the damage of time. "I heard you were dead," he said quietly. "Not yet." Behind them, Rex strained again, reacting to the raised tension in the air. Ellis lifted a hand. "Stand down," he ordered the handlers. "Secure him." Sarah hesitated only a fraction of a second before signaling compliance. The handlers adjusted, increasing distance, lowering pressure. Rex's body remained taut, but the immediate surge eased. Ellis turned back to Lucas. "You're SEAL," he said, not a question. "K9 attachment." Lucas nodded once. Ellis exhaled slowly. "I knew your handler reports. Hell of a reputation." "That was a long time ago?" "Not to dogs like that," Ellis said, nodding toward Rex. The security officer stepped back, uncertain now. Ellis waved him off without looking. "Pause the evaluation," Ellis said, voice carrying across the field. Sarah stiffened. "Sir?" "I want to hear what he has to say." The words rippled outward, drawing attention from the remaining staff. Sarah studied Lucas more closely now, reassessing. She saw the discipline beneath the rough edges, the familiarity in the way Rex watched him, even from across the field. Lucas swallowed. He had not intended this. He had told himself to stay silent. But silence had never saved anyone. "That dog isn't disobedient," he said. His voice was rough, unused to being heard. "He's still working." Ellis held his gaze. "Explain." Lucas nodded toward Rex. "He's reacting to frontal approach as a breach. He's not seeing trainers. He's seeing contact." A murmur spread through the observers. Sarah felt something shift inside her, a realization she had been circling but never named. Ellis did not look away from Lucas. "You're saying we're treating him like a civilian asset?" "Yes," Lucas said, "and he's still on deployment." Ellis was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "All right," he said. "We're not doing this here, but we're not finishing it either." He turned to Sarah. "Secure the field. I want a debrief in 30 minutes. Then back to Lucas. "You're coming with me." Lucas hesitated, eyes flicking once toward Rex. The dog had gone still, gaze locked on him, as if waiting. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Lucas said. Ellis met his eyes. "You already have." And for the first time in years, Lucas followed an order. The holding yard behind the kennels was smaller than the main field, boxed in by concrete walls, stained dark by years of rain and salt air. A single floodlight buzzed overhead, despite the gray afternoon, casting a flat, unforgiving glow across the ground. This was where mistakes were contained, where variables were reduced to what could be measured and controlled. Lucas Hale stood just outside the gate, shoulders squared, hands visible at his sides, aware of every eye on him without needing to look. Captain Robert Ellis watched from a few steps back, arms folded, posture deceptively relaxed. Years of command had taught him when to press and when to let silence do the work. Beside him stood Sarah Mitchell, tall and spare in her navy jacket, jaw set, eyes fixed on Rex. The tension in her stance had shifted from defensive to alert curiosity. She was not convinced, but she was listening. Dr. Alan Pierce hovered near the gate, tablet tucked under one arm, glasses fogging slightly as he breathed. He had changed his position twice already, searching for the angle that made the most sense to him. The dog did not. Rex stood inside the yard, harness removed, a wide leather collar secured around his neck. Without restraint, he looked larger, not because he moved, but because nothing held him back. His coat was damp along the spine, fur darkened by mist. He faced the gate directly, ears forward, eyes locked on Lucas with a focus that did not flicker. This was not recognition. It was assessment. "Remember," Ellis said quietly, "you stop the moment we say so." Lucas nodded. He did not answer aloud. He was listening to something else. He stepped through the gate slowly, careful to keep his shoulders angled rather than square. His boots made a soft sound on the wet concrete. Rex's head dipped a fraction, muscles tightening, but he did not advance. The distance between them held. Lucas stopped 3 paces in. He did not kneel. He did not reach out. He let the space remain. Sarah felt her breath catch despite herself. Every protocol she knew urged engagement, redirection, command. Lucas did none of it. Rex's breathing was audible now, controlled but fast, chest rising and falling like a bellows. His tail remained still, neither tucked nor raised. A dog poised on the edge of decision. Lucas spoke then, his voice low, not projected. The words were not English. They were not purely German either, but a hybrid cadence shaped by field necessity rather than grammar. Short phrases, directional cues. A pattern meant to be heard under stress, to cut through chaos and land where instinct lived. Rex froze, not stiffened, froze. His ears flicked, rotating as if trying to triangulate a sound that did not belong here. His eyes widened slightly, the sharp focus breaking just enough to reveal uncertainty beneath it. He shifted his weight back, not retreating, but recalibrating. Dr. Pierce lowered his tablet without realizing it. Lucas did not move closer. He spoke again, softer this time, adding a second phrase that carried no command, only context. A reference to position, to perimeter, to a place defined by function rather than geography. Rex's head tilted. Sarah felt the moment slide sideways, reality bending just enough to let something new through. She had spent years watching dogs react. She had never seen one listen like this. "Jesus," she whispered. Rex took a single step forward, then stopped himself. His muscles trembled, not with aggression, but restraint. The low sound in his chest faded into a quiet exhale. His gaze dropped from Lucas's face to his hands, then back up again, searching. Lucas swallowed. His throat felt tight, memories pressing in around the edges. He remembered another dog, years ago, standing in a place not unlike this one, waiting for a signal that would never come. He had not recognized the waiting then. He recognized it now. "You're still on duty," Lucas said quietly, this time in English. The words were not for Rex alone. Rex's ears flattened slightly, confusion rippling through his posture. He shifted again, claws scraping softly against concrete. Lucas took one step forward. Slow, deliberate, he kept his hands low, palms open, body angled. He spoke again in the old cadence, the language that had never been meant to last this long. The final phrase was not a command. It was a release. Rex's legs buckled, not collapsing, yielding. He lowered himself to the ground in a controlled motion, chest touching first, then hindquarters folding beneath him. His head dropped, chin resting against the concrete, eyes still on Lucas, but no longer sharp. The tension bled out of his body in visible waves, shoulders loosening, breath evening out. A sound escaped him then, barely more than a breath pushed through fur, raw and unguarded. No one spoke. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes before she could stop them. She did not wipe them away. Ellis exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath for years without realizing it. Dr. Pierce stared openly now, disbelief etched across his face. "That's not possible," he murmured, though his voice lacked conviction. "We've never seen a response like that." Lucas knelt then, careful, measured. Rex did not flinch. He reached out and rested his hand against the dog's shoulder, feeling the heat beneath damp fur, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat, no longer racing. "You're not broken," Lucas said, voice rough. "You just never got the stand down." Rex leaned into the touch, just enough to close the distance he had guarded so fiercely. His eyes closed halfway, ears lowering to a neutral position. The dog was still alert, but the edge was gone. Sarah stepped closer without thinking, stopping herself at the last moment. She watched the way Rex responded, not to dominance or reassurance, but to recognition. Ellis cleared his throat. "Explain it," he said, though there was no demand in his tone now, only need. Lucas looked up. "You've been asking him to unlearn what kept him alive," he said. "He doesn't know how to do that without permission." Sarah felt the words settle into place inside her. Every failed session, every note in her log. She had been correcting behavior that was never wrong. Dr. Pierce found his voice. "You didn't use a single approved command." Lucas shook his head. "Because the manual doesn't include endings." Ellis watched Rex for a long moment, then nodded once. "All right," he said. "We're not done here." Lucas rose slowly, keeping one hand on Rex until the dog shifted comfortably. When he stepped back, Rex did not follow. He stayed where he was, calm, grounded, no longer scanning for threats beyond the walls. For the first time since his return, Lucas felt something inside him loosen. Not relief. Recognition. The dog had not needed to be fixed. He had needed to be understood. And Lucas knew, with a certainty that frightened him, that this was only the beginning. The decision came without ceremony, delivered in a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and damp wool coats. Rain traced thin lines down the narrow windows as if even the weather were undecided. Captain Robert Ellis stood at the head of the table, hands braced against the wood, shoulders squared in a way that suggested resolve rather than confidence. Around him sat the people who would carry the consequences. Sarah Mitchell took the chair nearest the door, posture straight, expression guarded. Dr. Alan Pierce sat opposite her, tablet resting unused on his knee, eyes still searching for language that could explain what he had witnessed. Lucas Hale remained standing along the wall, hands folded loosely, gaze lowered, aware that permission could be withdrawn as quickly as it had been granted. 72 hours, Ellis said. Controlled environment, no public access, full veterinary oversight, 2 handlers on standby at all times. Sarah nodded, already cataloging contingencies. She was tall and spare, her movements efficient, but the muscles along her jaw tightened as the parameters were laid out. She had built her career on reducing risk, on believing that preparation could contain uncertainty. What she had seen with Rex had cracked that belief, not shattered it, but shifted it just enough to make room for something unfamiliar. Rex would remain in the enclosed training yard, away from the main field, where stimuli could be controlled and response measured. Lucas would be allowed contact under supervision, his methods documented but not standardized. It was a compromise that satisfied no one completely, which Ellis took as a sign it was probably right. Lucas listened without interrupting. He did not argue for more time. He knew how fragile this opening was. He also knew that endings rarely came cleanly. They came in increments, in hours borrowed from decisions made elsewhere. When the meeting adjourned, Ellis lingered, watching Lucas gather his jacket. "You understand what's at stake," Ellis said. Lucas nodded. "I do." Ellis hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "You always did well with the ones nobody else could reach." Lucas met his gaze briefly. "That's because I wasn't trying to fix them." Ellis said nothing more. The first hours of the trial passed without incident. Rex remained calm, alert, but grounded, responding to Lucas's presence without reverting to defensive patterns. Sarah observed from behind reinforced glass, noting the absence of escalation where she had once expected it. She had spent years correcting posture, timing commands, adjusting tone. Now she watched a dog respond to something that had nothing to do with obedience. That night, Emily Carter sat alone in her office above the bait shop, reviewing notes she had taken earlier that day. She was still slight, still bundled against the cold, but her expression carried a restless energy that had not been there before. The phone call from Ellis replayed in her mind, his measured tone asking for context rather than permission. Emily had learned to recognize moments when systems bent just enough to allow change. This felt like one of them. She pulled a marker from her desk drawer and stood before the whiteboard that listed her program's dwindling participants. Names were crossed out, erased, rewritten. She added a new heading beneath them, written slowly, deliberately: Pilot Concept. The idea had come to her as she watched Rex settle in the yard, the dog's body finally releasing tension it had carried too long. She thought of Daniel Brooks, of Michael Lawson, of all the men and women who had sat across from her desk and told her they missed being useful. Not busy. Useful. Responsibility had given Rex permission to rest. What would it do for people who had never been told they could stop? The next morning, Emily walked to the facility. The rain had eased, leaving the air sharp and clean. She wore the same wool coat, her auburn hair tucked behind her ears, eyes bright with resolve. She asked for Sarah Mitchell by name. Sarah met her outside the observation area, arms crossed against the cold. Up close, Emily could see the fatigue etched beneath Sarah's control, the cost of carrying decisions that rarely offered comfort. "I hear you've got 72 hours, Emily said. Sarah studied her. "That's what they're calling it." "I want to propose something," Emily said. "Not for now, for after." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Walk with me." They stopped near the fence where Rex lay quietly inside the yard, head up, eyes following Lucas's movement. The dog's posture was relaxed but attentive, like someone waiting for the next instruction, not with dread, but readiness. Emily spoke carefully. "The people I work with aren't failing because they can't adapt. They're failing because they're still carrying responsibility with nowhere to put it." Sarah glanced at Rex. "You're saying they need a mission." "I'm saying they need permission to finish one," Emily replied. Sarah exhaled slowly. "And you think pairing them with dogs like him would do that?" "Yes." Sarah did not answer immediately. She thought of the reports she had written, the recommendations she had signed, the dogs she had watched leave the facility without ceremony. She thought of the quiet violence of being labeled unrecoverable. "It's risky," she said finally. Emily nodded. "So is what we're doing now." That afternoon, the first formal observation of the trial took place. Dr. Pierce monitored Rex's vitals while Lucas repeated the same controlled interactions, varying environment and distance, never rushing, never forcing engagement. Rex responded consistently, grounding himself when given context, scanning less, breathing more evenly. Dr. Pierce scribbled notes faster than usual. He was a man who trusted data, but he had learned that data lagged behind truth. What he saw unsettled him, not because it contradicted science, but because it exposed a gap he had never considered. During a break, he approached Lucas. "What happens after the 72 hours?" he asked. Lucas considered the question. "He keeps working," he said, "just differently." Dr. Pierce frowned. "And when he's done?" Lucas met his eyes. Then someone tells him. That evening, Ellis convened a smaller meeting. Emily was invited this time, her presence unofficial but acknowledged. She outlined her proposal calmly, describing a pilot program pairing veterans who had failed traditional reintegration with dogs deemed unsuitable for standard service. She spoke of structure without rigidity, responsibility without pressure, endings without erasure. Ellis listened, fingers steepled. Sarah watched him closely. She had learned that when Ellis asked few questions, it meant he was weighing outcomes rather than objections. "It's a risk," Ellis said at last. Emily nodded. "It always is." Ellis glanced toward the observation window, where Rex lay quietly, Lucas seated nearby, not touching, simply present. "So was letting him back in the yard," he said. The second night passed without incident. Rex slept deeply for the first time since arriving at the facility, his body loose, breath steady. Lucas remained nearby, seated against the wall, eyes half closed, listening for sounds that did not come. By the third morning, the change was undeniable. Rex moved through the yard with purpose, but without tension, responding to cues with clarity rather than urgency. Sarah felt something ease inside her chest as she recorded the final observations. When the 72 hours ended, Ellis stood at the gate, reviewing the reports. He looked at Rex, then at Lucas, then at Emily. "We'll call it a pilot," he said. "Quiet, limited, no promises." Emily smiled, small but fierce. "That's all I'm asking." Lucas rested a hand briefly against Rex's shoulder. The dog leaned into the touch, steady and present. The risk no one wanted had been taken. The pilot moved fast, not because anyone rushed it, but because momentum had finally replaced hesitation. Each morning began before sunrise. The enclosed yard smelled of damp concrete and cold metal. Lucas Hale arrived first, every day, jacket zipped, hands bare despite the chill. Rex was already waiting on the other side of the gate, standing, alert, calm. No pacing, no scanning, just presence. Work started immediately, no warm-up routines, no ceremonial commands. Lucas adjusted distance, changed angles, walked away, came back. Rex followed cues without tension. When Lucas stopped, Rex stopped. When Lucas turned his back, Rex did not react. That alone changed everything. Sarah Mitchell watched from behind the glass, clipboard in hand, eyes sharper than usual. She was used to tracking mistakes. Now she tracked absences. No lunging, no vocalization, no stress spikes. Her tall frame leaned forward as if the pace itself pulled her closer. The woman who once trusted only procedure was learning to trust patterns. By the third day, Rex slept during breaks, full body on the ground, head down, not resting, sleeping. That was when the first veteran arrived. Daniel Brooks showed up carrying a single canvas duffel, 55. Broad shoulders that sloped forward as if bracing for impact. Short gray hair, careful eyes. He did not ask questions. He did not look around. He stood where Emily Carter told him to stand, and waited. Years in logistics had taught him that waiting was sometimes the job. Emily stayed close, slight build, wool coat buttoned wrong, hair pulled back with no concern for symmetry. She spoke less now, watched more. The idea was fragile. She knew it. Fragile things survived only if handled gently. Daniel's assigned dog was Willow, 4 years old, Belgian Malinois, lean, fast, eyes always moving. Her record read like a warning label: overreaction, snapping, zero tolerance for uncertainty. She circled the yard the moment Daniel entered. Lucas did not step in. "Sit," he told Daniel. "Anywhere." Daniel sat against the wall, back straight, hands on knees. He did not look at Willow. He did not reach. He waited. Minutes passed. Willow paced, stopped, started again. Her nails clicked sharp against concrete. Daniel did not move. Then Willow stopped pacing. She sat. Emily felt her breath leave her lungs. By the end of the hour, Willow lay down. Daniel leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. No one spoke. The second pairing came 2 days later. Michael Lawson returned without announcement. 48, former Marine infantry. Heavy frame held together by habit rather than health. He looked older than Daniel, though he was not. He had left the program once already. He did not apologize. He did not explain. Emily accepted him back without comment. His dog was Atlas, German Shepherd, 6 years old, massive chest, dark coat. History of lunging incidents that had cleared rooms. Atlas watched Michael with open curiosity, head tilted slightly, as if surprised by the lack of challenge. Michael knelt instead of standing. Atlas stepped forward instead of back. Sarah noticed. Rex worked beside Lucas throughout it all, not demonstrating, anchoring. Other dogs watched him settle and mirrored the calm without realizing it. Rex moved like a dog who knew where he was. That was new. By the second week, routines formed without being written down. Veterans arrived early. Dogs waited at gates instead of pulling. Commands were spoken less often. Listening took their place. Setbacks came fast, too. A metal door slammed unexpectedly. Willow snapped toward the sound. Daniel flinched, stopped, breathed. Willow froze, then looked back at him. He stayed seated. She settled. No correction. No escalation. Michael missed a session. Atlas paced for hours. When Michael returned the next morning, Atlas pressed his head into Michael's chest hard enough to stagger him. Michael laughed once. Rough, unplanned, real. Sarah stopped intervening unless safety demanded it. Every instinct told her to correct sooner. She learned to wait longer. That wait changed her. Dr. Alan Pierce tracked data that no longer felt theoretical. Cortisol levels dropped, sleep cycles normalized, stress indicators faded. He stopped checking boxes and started writing sentences. Lucas stepped away more often, first for minutes, then for hours. Rex stayed grounded. When Lucas returned, Rex did not rush him. He acknowledged him. That mattered. Lucas changed too. He slept. He ate regularly. He stayed. One morning he realized he had been humming under his breath. He stopped, then started again. The first clear success came quietly. Atlas completed a corridor walk during a controlled facility drill. People passed, doors opened, no lunging, no warning signs. Michael's hands shook afterward. Atlas leaned into his leg until they stopped. Ellis signed the continuation order that afternoon. No speech, no announcement, just a signature. The program remained temporary. Funding uncertain. Oversight constant. Everyone knew one mistake could end it. That knowledge sharpened focus instead of dulling it. On the last morning of the month, the group gathered in the yard. Dogs at their handlers' sides, veterans standing straighter, not rigid, present. Rex lay down without being told. Lucas looked around. No one here was being repaired. No one was being controlled. They were being trusted. And trust, it turned out, worked faster than anything else ever had. The storm arrived just after dawn, rolling in from the Pacific with the kind of quiet confidence that left no room for doubt. Gray waves slammed against the rocks below the bluffs, wind tearing white spray into the air and driving rain sideways across the shoreline north of Port Townsend. Sirens cut through the morning as a distress call came in from a small recreational boat that had failed to return overnight. 2 people missing. Last known position just beyond the kelp line, where currents twisted unpredictably and visibility collapsed without warning. Rex was already awake. He stood at the open back of the transport vehicle, paws planted, ears forward, reading the wind the way he had once read corridors and alleyways. At 6 years old now, the German Shepherd carried himself differently. His coat was thicker, glossier. The scars remained, but they no longer defined his movement. His amber eyes tracked the shoreline not with urgency, but clarity. Lucas Hale tightened the straps on his weatherproof jacket and checked Rex's harness one last time. The jacket was new, issued officially, marked with insignia he had not worn in years. It fit him well. He stood straighter now, his lean frame filled out, his beard trimmed short, his hair cut clean. At 42, Lucas looked older than the man who had first crossed the fence a year ago, but steadier, as if the weight he carried had finally been distributed instead of compressed. He was no longer a visitor. He was the lead rehabilitation specialist attached to the program that now had a name, a budget, and oversight that did not feel like suspicion. Sarah Mitchell stood nearby, clipboard absent for once, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. She was still tall and spare, still composed, but the guarded edge that once defined her posture had softened. A year of watching trust work where control had failed had changed her. She still believed in structure. She simply no longer confused it with authority. Emily Carter watched from behind the staging area, hair pulled back, rain darkening the shoulders of her coat. The program had nearly broken her twice over the past year. Funding delays, reviews, quiet skepticism from people who needed proof before belief. But here it was, proof moving on 4 legs toward the surf. The search began with coordination rather than chaos. Rex worked the shoreline methodically, nose low, tail steady, moving against the wind. Lucas followed at a measured distance, speaking only when necessary. The storm battered them both, but Rex did not falter. He adjusted, recalibrated, worked. 37 minutes in, Rex stopped. His body stiffened, not with tension but focus. He turned sharply toward a cluster of rocks partially submerged by the tide and let out a single bark. Clear, final. Rescue teams moved in fast. Moments later, one of the missing boaters was found clinging to debris, hypothermic but alive. The second was located minutes after, farther down the shoreline, unconscious but breathing. No one cheered, no one spoke. The work continued until it was done. When it was over, Rex sat beside Lucas, rain streaming off his coat, chest rising and falling evenly. He did not pace. He did not scan for the next threat. He waited. That was when Ellis made the call official. The program's recognition came quietly, folded into paperwork and briefings rather than ceremonies. The pilot designation was removed, funding secured, replication approved. Other facilities would call soon. Some already had. Lucas accepted the offer to stay without hesitation. He trained handlers now, not dogs. He taught them how to watch, how to wait, how to recognize when a mission had ended even if the body had not caught up. He refused media interviews. He refused speeches. He showed up every morning and worked. Rex remained at his side. Not assigned. Partnered. The graduation took place on a clear afternoon, the harbor calm for once, sunlight breaking through clouds that had lingered too long over the city. There were no banners, no speeches longer than necessary. Just a group of veterans standing with dogs that no one else had known what to do with. Daniel Brooks stood straight, Willow seated at his left, her restless energy transformed into focus. Michael Lawson rested a hand on Atlas's shoulder, the dog leaning into the contact without pushing. Emily watched from the edge, eyes bright, hands clasped tight enough to hurt. Lucas stood apart from the group, Rex sitting beside him. The dog wore a new collar now, dark blue, his name stitched cleanly in silver thread. Lucas kept the old one in his pocket, the worn leather softened by time. He would always keep it there. As the last certificate was handed out, the group began to disperse. Conversations started. Laughter broke through. Dogs shifted, relaxed, grounded. Lucas knelt then, the movement smooth, practiced. Rex turned his head slightly, ears angling back, attention focused entirely on him. Lucas rested a hand on Rex's chest, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath his palm. He leaned close, close enough that the world narrowed to breath and warmth and presence. "Stand down," he said softly. "You're home." Rex did not move. He did not need to. He simply sat there, calm and certain, leaning into Lucas's side as the wind moved gently off the water. Around them, life continued. Work waited. New missions would come. But this one was finished, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Sometimes the miracle is timing. A broken man standing in the right place. A wounded soul finally hearing the words it has waited years to hear. Rex did not need to be fixed. Lucas did not need to be redeemed by punishment or suffering. What they needed was understanding. And understanding is often the way God moves quietly through the world. Scripture tells us that God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. But healing does not always look like comfort. Sometimes it looks like responsibility. Sometimes it looks like being trusted again when we believe we no longer deserve it. In daily life, we walk past people who look lost, veterans, strangers, neighbors, sometimes even ourselves. We assume the damage is permanent, but God sees what is still usable, what is still strong, what is still called. If you are carrying guilt, grief, or a past you cannot silence, this story is for you. Your mission may not be over. It may simply be different. And if you are in a position to offer patience, to listen, to trust someone again, do not underestimate that act. It may be the answer to a prayer you never heard spoken. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to tell us where you are watching from. And if you believe in second chances, in quiet miracles, and in God working through ordinary people, subscribe to the channel so we can continue telling stories like this. Let us pray together that God watches over every wounded soul, every faithful animal, every unseen battle still being fought. May He grant peace where there is fear, purpose where there is loss, and rest where the mission has gone on too long. If you believe, comment Amen below.